When you walk up to someone and you introduce yourself by one name. What this means is that you see yourself as a single unit of consciousness. You see yourself as I, or as me. The problem with this is that it indicates that you don't see the full truth of yourself. In other words, the perspective that you are a unit of consciousness does not accommodate for the full truth of yourself. What it means is that you're only seeing the forest and not the trees that comprise that forest. With all this in mind, I'm going to say that one of the single biggest steps you can take towards awakening is to see yourself as an ecosystem instead. To begin to see yourself as an ecosystem that is being called by one name. You call yourself by one name, but you are in essence an accumulation of a very complex system of smaller units of consciousness, just like an ecosystem is. To understand what I mean, look at the ecosystem of the Amazon rainforest. We call the Amazon rainforest by one name, but it's an accumulation of its emergent layer, canopy layer, understory layer, forest floor layer, which themselves are comprised of an accumulation of evergreen trees, flowering plants, birds, insects, reptiles, fungi, amphibian, rainfall, and soil, etc. From objective perspective, each physical human is his or her own universe. You can zoom in to see that any element that comprises what a human is has its own unique consciousness. For example, every cell within you has its own consciousness. Every organ that makes up your body has its own unique consciousness. You are an accumulation of your spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical layers. Your body contains more bacterial cells than human cells, about 10 times more in fact, many of which you could not survive without. They are integral to the system that makes up you. They are considered to be an integral part of you. Your psyche is also not singular. It is made up of many different parts. We have a tendency of calling these parts sides or facets of a person's personality. As a physical human, you have so many things that added together equal you. To understand more about this, watch my video titled Fragmentation, the Worldwide Disease. Any ecosystem is a community of interacting organisms. Any system is a community of interacting units of consciousness. It is, in essence, a complex, interconnected network. The system that you are comprised of is entirely unique. You may be able to identify common trends within your system that may reflect or mirror other trends within systems in the greater universe. But it has its own configuration, and each different element of it has a specific relationship to all other parts of the system. For example, your kidneys have a very specific relationship to your bladder. Your mental layer of consciousness has a very specific relationship to your gut biome. And these relationships that take place within the system of you can range anywhere from completely functional, symbiotic, and loving, mutually beneficial, all the way over to oppositional, detrimental, dysfunctional, and anything in between. To be fully aware and completely conscious, we have to be able to do two things. We have to be able to zoom out, and we also have to be able to zoom in. Both of these techniques are necessary to be fully conscious of what is occurring in any given circumstance. When we treat the assemblage of everything that comprises us as a single unit of consciousness, and therefore zoom out, that is precisely what we are doing. We are zooming out to treat a collective as a single point. For example, there are millions upon millions of people on this planet. We could zoom out so that all of those people, the amalgamation of them, creates a single unit of consciousness. We could call that the consciousness of humanity. In all honesty, we could zoom out or zoom in indefinitely in this universe. For example, even if you zoom in to become aware of the consciousness of a single cell, that single cell is also, in fact, its own ecosystem of even smaller units of consciousness. And if you were to go into one part of a single cell, that part too would be its own ecosystem of sorts. One of the reasons why we have to be able to do this zoom out process, where we're treating an amalgamation of things as one thing, is to be able to identify commonalities, patterns, and trends. To understand more about this, watch my video titled The Surprising Truth, Generalization, Stereotyping, and Uniqueness. All this being said, In order to be truly conscious, we also have to be able to zoom in, and that is what people have the hardest time doing. Why? Because the process of zooming in requires disidentification. Essentially, in zooming in, most people feel as if they are losing a sense of a singular self. When you start the zoom in process, the question quite quickly becomes, what the hell am I? The answer, of course, is that you are all of them, and by being all of them, you are, by definition, not any single one part. This zooming in process requires disidentification. In case you would like to learn more about disidentification, you can watch my video that is titled, Disidentification, the Process of Non-Attachment. When all you see is the whole forest, as if it is one thing, and fail to recognize the tree within that forest, you actually lose sense of what is happening in the forest. Sticking with this analogy, it is ignorant to refuse to recognize that the tree has its own unique self. This means its own personal truths, including likes and dislikes, desires and perspective, as well as relationships to other trees, insects, soil, and weather in the forest. If you cannot recognize the unique consciousness that belongs to the tree, you will not be able to see, feel, hear, or understand any of the problems that are arising in the system of the forest. So often when a person cannot figure out what the hell is going on with them, or doesn't really have a good sense of themselves, it is because they are not doing this zoom-in process. All of what is happening at that tree level is happening beneath the surface of conscious awareness. In essence, using this analogy, they are looking at the whole forest and refusing to see any one tree within that forest and that tree's relationship to any other elements within that forest. What you have to do in order to understand any element within the ecosystem, or understand the ecosystem itself, is to get deep into the perspective of any one unit within that ecosystem. You have to get as deep as you possibly can to fully understand and comprehend it and its relationship to all of the things within that system. When you do this, the symptoms you are seeing in that greater forest that is you begin to make sense. The second the medical establishment understands this, the entire human approach to both illness and medicine will change. If this concept of learning how to zoom in interests you, I have your first step. In order to learn this first step, you can watch my video titled Parts Work, What is Parts Work and How to Do It. But for the sake of this episode, I simply want you to ask yourself a question. And after you ask yourself this question, I want you to ponder on it for the day. Don't just answer it outright. Just really be thinking about it. Here's the question. If it were true that my name is just the title given to an accumulation of an entire system of things that I am comprised of, in other words, if I were to see myself as an ecosystem instead of a single being, what would change for me? How might I begin to live differently? And how would I approach problems that arose in my life differently? Seeing the amalgamation of all of the units of consciousness that added together create you will change your approach to life. It will change the way you see life. It will make it rich. It will make it deep. It will make it so much more alive. What will be revealed to you is the incredible complexity of existence, but within that complexity, the simplicity of it all. You will also find so many of those answers you seek. Have a good week. If you liked this video, be sure to share it, like it, and also subscribe to my channel.